Thank you, Marcus, and thank you everyone for being here. It was 10 years ago that I was first here as a nominator, invited to be part of the Prince Claus family, and I've seen this family grow and go deeper into it. I was very honored this year to be invited to be the chair of the jury, but I owe everything, one, to the nominators who nominated this incredible list of 115 possible winners, and to my fellow jury members, Maya, who's here, Ding, but also Mariam and Faustin. I learned a lot from all you. It was not easy to get to these decisions. Contrary to other jury processes, we met 3 times during the process of a year and really got to know each one of the nominees deeply. It was a very tough decision to get where we are now, but I think we did the right decisions. When we first finally met the winners a few days ago here in Amsterdam, we knew the decision was right. We were touched, surprised, humbled, and inspired by all of them. So I want to thank them, all the winners, and I'll introduce one by one. They'll come here and they'll tell us a little bit about them. They'll present their practices and show why it is so important what they do and how they inspire not only us in our own disciplines, but inspire society as such. And I think that's a real impact of the Prince Claus Awards. May al-Ibrashy is an architect whose work engaged often marginalized communities in Cairo's historic center in the conservation and rehabilitation of the cultural heritage. She founded the Megawra Built Environment Collective, which works as an architectural firm and an NGO. Through her work, she successfully links cultural heritage to sustainability and social responsibility. May al-Ibrashy.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Pablo. Hello, everyone. I'm the first one, so it's a bit nerve-wracking. But let me start by saying that it's wonderful to win any award. But it's exceptionally an honor to win an award from the Prince Claus Foundation Fund, because I personally have great admiration and I have great love for this organization, so thank you. I'm going to talk to you today about our work. We are as Pablo said, we are an initiative that is interested in heritage, in historic Cairo, but we're interested in it in a bit of a different way, because we think while it is extremely important to preserve our heritage, particularly our architectural heritage, we also think that this does not happen without the collaboration and the cooperation of communities, and it does not happen without actually the full partnership with communities. Oh yes, I need that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to present to you some of our work and our journey over the last 10 years. Let's see if this works. Oh, that's not me, is it? It's not working. All right. So, this is historic Cairo. This is where I work. And it is a World Heritage Site, 32 square kilometers of heritage, urban and architectural. Dusty, chaotic, beautiful, and also very intriguing and very unwieldy to deal with. And yes, when you go through the city, this kind of yellow, dusty city, as I said, you can never imagine that certain buildings that you enter will be a riot of color, of geometry, of patterns, of nature abstracted into the most beautiful forms. And this is what I fell in love with as an architect 30 years ago. So I've been working in conservation for 30 years, but 10 years ago, we founded Athar Lina initiative. Athar Lina translates as Heritage is Art in the southern section of historic Cairo. We work in a district called El Khalifa, and within it we work in 3 neighborhoods. And I will try to walk you through some drawings and images of through our process of trying to make sense of this neighborhood where we work the way we know best, through drawing and through photography and through understanding its architecture and its urban heritage. But as I do that, I'm also going to invite you to see that there is a kind of missing link that we came to as we try to make sense of our neighborhood. So this is the first area where we work, Al Khalifa Street area. And we try to make sense of the neighborhood as elements within the street, a street that is a street, but very different from the streets that you know in Amsterdam. We also try to understand it through mapping its buildings and its open spaces and understanding it as a map. And we also tried to tease out the hidden beauty in the, the derelict buildings that we had, and to see how they can kind of come to the fore, this beauty can come to the fore without us changing the heritage within this area. This is the second neighborhood, Al-Hattaba, at the foot of Cairo Citadel, those of you who know Cairo. And in this case, it was an area threatened by demolition. So when we engaged with that area, it was to think of the buildings that you saw that were in a very bad state and think of how they can become new spaces. They can be reactivated as spaces for the community. And the drawing that you see in front of you is actually a proposal for a design and craft center in that neighborhood. We managed to get a stay on demolition on the neighborhood, but it's still, unfortunately, in a bad condition, and we'll see how we can change that in the future. And this is the third neighborhood where we work. This is Imam al-Shafi'i Cemetery. And in this case, we engaged with the most iconic historic building in that cemetery, a 13th century shrine of Imam al-Shafi'i. But even and you would expect me to show you drawings of, the documentation of the buildings, etc. But what I'm going to show you is what we discovered over and over again as we work in conservation, that without seeing the meaning of these buildings, in the hearts and the eyes of the communities that visit them, that live around them, that live within them, the buildings do not make any kind of sense. So what we as architects and people who work on conservation have been learning over and over again is that it is all about the community, it is all about the people. And this is how we decided that we want to work. So what we do is we try to engender the sense of belonging and the sense of ownership that communities should have for this heritage, because without that sense of ownership, they mean nothing and they will not be preserved. And that is what we have been trying to do for the last 10 years. I'm going to show you a 2-minute film that kind of encompasses the work that we've done. Let's see if this works. Yes. So these are the 3 areas that we talked about, and the kind of work that we do there, whether conservation, rehabilitation, or heritage industries and heritage education, or urban regeneration, but all this with a kind of underlying network of studies and reports, etc. We've worked on the conservation of 5 buildings so far. The one thing I want to say about conservation is that it's not just about the conservation of the buildings, it is about the conservation of the crafts, the intangible heritage. Without conservation, they would not be there anymore, the stonemasons, the carpenters, etc. But it's also about job creation. And speaking of socioeconomic empowerment, when we speak of education, and I'm going to tease these issues out very quickly after we're done with the film, we're not just talking about education, we're talking about heritage industries. How do you use heritage as inspiration to create jobs and to create income-generating activities? And these activities, they could be crafts, they could be tours, they could be walks, they could be design that is inspired by heritage, etc. Then on an urban level, it becomes a bit more complicated because we're dealing with a thriving neighborhood. We're dealing with a neighborhood that already has its own ways of coping and also growing and also thriving. And the question is always how to tap into these patterns, not to disrupt them, but to actually build on them. This is the neighborhood that I was talking about that is threatened by demolition. And this is important for those of you who are interested in conservation and in management of heritage in general, that a lot of the work that we do is actually documented in toolkits and publications and reports that are all published online, almost all of them both in English and in Arabic. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in a minute, and this is the work that we do on an urban level, particularly with the problem of groundwater, and I will talk about this in a minute. Okay, so let's look about the, let's look at the first, I'm going to show you 3 very short examples. I have 3 minutes, so 1 minute each. So I think what we always are trying to do as people who work in this neighborhood in that way is to balance between meaning, which is what we normally get as architects and as people who are interested in heritage, and use, which is what we should work on to make this kind of heritage relevant and important to communities. So in terms of conservation, for example, this is the first building that we worked on. It's a 13th century building, and it's beautiful in its own right, and the work that we did is important in its own right. But the reason we chose it, is because right next to it is another old building from the 1920s that used to be a community center. And we chose it because it was an opportunity to put ourselves as conservators in the first building and to take control of the second building and reactivate it as a place for the community. And then this is another example. This is heritage education. Obviously, it's important for our children to know about their heritage, and we do a lot of work on that. But as our children grew older, and as we started engaging with adults, particularly women, it did not just become about teaching children about education, but vocational training, as I said, to get people from the community to benefit from heritage as an income-generating resource. And then the third example, is the problem of groundwater, which affects the historic buildings in the neighborhood. And this is water that is leaking from the network pipes and from the sewage pipes, so it's important to get rid of it somehow. And what we've added to the equation is that we take this water and reuse it for greening to create parks and gardens for people of the community, for the benefit of the community. And in this case, completing the triangle of heritage, community, and environment. And this is my last slide, and I still have a minute, so I'm actually going to finish early. And this is just to thank the people that we work with, both in terms of the communities that we work with, but also the team of Asar Lina. And I'm not going to dedicate this prize to them. This is their prize, and I would really like you to join me in thanking them and honoring them for the work that they do. Thank you.